Welcome to the Grow Your Independent Consulting Business podcast. I'm Melissa Lieberman, a fellow IC and business coach. On this podcast, I teach you to become a consistently booked independent consultant without becoming a pushy salesperson or working 24/7. If I can do it, you can too. Listen on to find out how. Welcome to episode 128 of the Grow Your Independent Consulting Business podcast. I am so happy you're here today, as I always am, and I'm excited to talk with you about how to navigate stalled consulting agreements. Before we dive into that, though, I've been hearing from you that you like some personal updates, so I'll keep starting the episodes with a little bit of a personal insight. I have planned another corporate retreat. The last one I did, I know, was November of 2022. And that was the first corporate retreat I had ever planned. It was incredible, just from a rejuvenation perspective, an ability to think perspective, and a celebration perspective also. And so, anyway, go back if you want to and listen to that episode. We'll put the link in the show notes about corporate retreats. But I decided for this year, I work with my fractional CFO and we've budgeted for corporate retreats because I want that this is a practice in my business, a regular practice. But, I had been planning another one for November back at where I went, the Garden of the Gods Resort, which is absolutely gorgeous near my house. Anyway, I decided, you know what? I am going to not do something super fancy like that. I'm just going to find a really awesome, new hotel that has maybe like a kind of a sweet-ish feel to it and do something a little bit more streamlined. And I'm going to do two of them now, the nice fancy one and then also this more streamlined one, because this summer really took a toll on me. I don't know if it took a toll on you also, but I had different expectations of the summer in terms of slowing down a little bit in my business, which I did to some degree, but not as much as I thought I would. The amount of driving and just support of this swim team that I'm raising, my husband and I are raising, it was just a lot more taxing on my brain than I had realized at the time. And now I'm sort of to come out of the fog and realizing I needed like a jump start as it relates to space, just space to think, space to work on some projects that are a little bit more interrupted, space to truly think, be a CEO, be a CFO, be a CRO, be a COO, just really spending time and uninterrupted space and not on a kind of a gauntlet of a deadline, but that space to think. And that I find as running a business is so important. And most of us don't take time away off of the hamster wheel to make that happen. So if you need the same reminder that I did, which is you're feeling a little bit dull maybe, or you're feeling just not yourself and need a little bit of a break, go make yourself a mini corporate retreat like I just did. It's at the end of the month, which is August, in a few weeks here. And then it'll move into Labor Day up in the mountains with my family, extended family, and celebrating the boys. Two of the three boys have birthdays over that weekend. So really excited about this corporate retreat. 5 days of my own time to really work on the business and that space to think, like I said, working on a couple of projects that I'm really excited about, planning Q4, and that extra space to think. So if you need to shake things up a little bit in your business, think about a corporate retreat for yourself, a mini one, and then do an awesome one like I described to you in that past episode as well. Do all the retreats. Okay. Your corporate offsites, however you want to describe them. So that's kind of a mini episode within this episode. But let's redirect here now that I've given you that update and that idea, hopefully that might resonate with you for where you're at with your business right now. So with that being said, let's dive into today's actual topic, which is how to navigate stalled consulting agreements. So tell me if you can relate to this. If you're like most consultants, you face these scenarios. You might be in the middle of one right now. And that is you generate this lead, you've walked them through your entire sales process. they're on board, they tell you they're ready to go, all the terms are worked out. You might have even signed a contract with that client. And somewhere between the part of verbal agreements and starting the engagement, there's a stall. The stall might be happening to get final signatures, or the stall might be happening to kick off the engagement. In either case, I want to walk you through today really specific examples of how this happens and what you can do when it happens and how to prevent it from happening maybe quite as often. I don't think you're ever going to prevent it from completely happening, these stalls, but certainly is something that you can reduce. When these stalls happen, I just really want to tell you that it can shake us, right? We get a verbal agreement, we're really excited, and then nothing happens. The contract, we know that a lot of times it can take a while in corporate, but when you're not hearing back from the stakeholder anymore, they're not responding to your emails or voicemails, it can really shake you. Or they even sign a contract and you think they're really excited to do the work that you've proposed, and then it stalls. It can really shake you. It can make you question yourself. It can make you question even the viability of your business. And so that's why I want to work with you on this today so that it doesn't take you down so much from a mental impact perspective. It doesn't create that self-doubt and those insecurities that are so commonly kicked up when this happens. So with that, let us talk about the agenda for today. So again, the topic is how to navigate stalled progress on your consulting agreements. And so first, we're going to go through an example of when an agreement gets stalled at the place where you've got a verbal and then you don't get the contract signature. And so we're going to talk about how to address that and even how to prevent it. And then we're going to go through a second scenario, which is you've got the contract signed and then there's a stall when it comes to getting the project kicked off. And again, we'll talk about how to address that and how to prevent it. And then finally, I'll pull it all together for you at the end with an overall formula that you can apply to these situations where you've got stalled consulting agreements. All right, that's our plan for today, my friend. First, I want to encourage you to use a companion resource that goes with this, and that is the Independent Consultant's Pricing Assessment. I'll dive a lot more into this right now, or here in a minute. But when we think about stalled consulting agreements, a lot of times our mind immediately goes to pricing. Oh no, I priced it too high. They changed their mind. The CEO told the stakeholder I was working with that person was crazy. He would never pay this amount, whatever it is. A lot of times leads us back to questioning our pricing. And so that's why I encourage you to go take the Independent Consultant's Pricing Assessment. It walks you through a handful of questions, and then we'll give you a very detailed action plan at the end to help you to revisit your pricing, figure out where you might be having missed opportunities or leaving money on the table. So you can go find that at the URL icpricing.com. So the two letters IC for independent consultants, pricing.com. Okay, so let's dive into the first part of the agenda, which is the scenario where you have a verbal. You've gone through the whole lead generation, you've gone through the whole sales process, you've created a proposal. The stakeholder that you're working with or the set of stakeholders you're working with have agreed to that an option in the proposal. Everything feels like you've succeeded. You have successfully gotten agreement from a consulting client and now they're smooth sailing. But it isn't always smooth sailing. You submit the statement of work or whatever the contract paperwork is that reflects the proposal, and then there's silence. I'll give you an example. I had a client who did this exact thing. Got the verbal on the proposal, transferred it to the statement of work, submitted the statement of work to the client. It was an existing client, actually, just a different business unit, I think it was. So we already had a master services agreement in place. It should be pretty straightforward, right? But after he submitted the statement of work, it was silence. Emails going unanswered. All of a sudden, it feels like ghosting is happening. And of course, because my client is a human just like you, started getting in his head, started thinking about what he did wrong. And so then it creates a spinning effect, right? This like constant thinking and obsessing what could possibly have gone wrong. I thought everything was lined up and now they're ignoring me, ghosting me, whatever it is. What has gone wrong? And so his brain was in overdrive thinking about this, making it about him first and foremost, right? Oh no, I priced this too high. I got greedy. I bet I ruined my reputation with this client because this person that I was working with is going to tell other people in the organization and maybe even go back to the people I've worked with in the past in that organization and tell them that I got greedy. And then none of them are going to work with me. And even the ones I previously worked, the other business units I had previously worked with will change their mind about me. And I'm never going to work there again. And you can see how that type of spiral easily is created, right? That's what my client was thinking, the independent consultant. All of those thoughts. And of course, it creates a downward spiral. And then from there, he started thinking, I just didn't want that job anyway, or this isn't the right fit for me anyway, right? It's almost a lot of us go into this mode. I didn't want that anyway, almost like a toddler. I'm calling this out as a toddler behavior because I've done it myself. So no shame in this, right? You're just a human if you're doing this too. Of course, you're going to want to protect yourself. Try to get your head into a space where you don't feel so bad about yourself. Of course, you're going to think things like, oh, I didn't want that job anyway, or they're rude. How could someone treat me this way? I don't want to work with them anyway. And just kind of create this whole spiral about what you've done wrong, what they've done wrong. And just in some cases, I've seen this go to even the point where you write it off. You write it off. You just decide, I'm not going to follow up again. So, luckily, I was working with this consultant. So, we were able to work through this together. This whole spiral that was happening was, an hour or two before he reached out to me for help. And we were able to really redirect this. And it's important for you to do this too. When you notice you're getting in your head about something, such as, ghosting when you've got this verbal and they're not signing the agreement, it doesn't seem to be going anywhere. The emotions are really high, all this spinning and all these thought processes you might be having. And when your emotions are high, your logic is low and it depletes your problem solving capability. So, the way that I worked with this consultant on this situation that I'll share with you today for you to implement, which, by the way, is tricky when you're doing it for yourself. I will say, I have my own coach for this exact reason. I get into the same situation sometimes. So, this is a human condition, my friend. Nothing is wrong with you. There's nothing to fix here about this human condition, but it is about how do I make this cycle shorter for myself? How do I not make it so intense for myself so that I can get my headspace into a place where I'm not making it about me and what I've done wrong, or not making it about the other person and how rude they are, but faster out of that type of cycle, less intensity for that type of cycle, which is a human nature that protects you mentally, right? And gets you into more of a problem solving mode. And so the problem solving mode looks like, first and foremost, this is not about you. This is not personal. Your nervous system may even be responding here, right? Fight or flight. Take that down, that temperature down by really thinking about, this is not me. This is not about me. I honestly have no idea what might have happened. It's really, quite frankly, not even valuable to go through the scenarios of what might happen. Sometimes when I do this to myself, I'm thinking the person might have died. Did it go into their spam folder? I mean, you're just like going through all of these scenarios, right? That is not helpful. It's using up so much of your brain power to be able to solve for this when you're in this kind of an emotional state. So the redirection here is about taking the temperature down. This is not about me. And the question is there really a problem here? And I like to look at it in two ways. Yes, there's a problem. Yes, something hit a snag And maybe they're nervous to tell me what it is. I don't know why they're not replying. And that's not really helpful to even guess why they're not replying. But let's just assume there is a problem. What would I do? That's what I help this particular consultant work through as I'm describing this back to you. What would you do if there really is a problem? And then the second question is, if there isn't a problem, what would you do? Likely there isn't a problem here. Something just came up, or they're really busy, or they went on vacation and didn't tell you. Who knows, right? Who knows? We don't know. Not so helpful to even try to guess. But the redirection here, because when when your emotions are so high, your logic is low and you're depleting your problem solving capability. So, what I did with this consultant and I'm sharing with you today is first, we're just going to take the temperature down by really thinking and believing it's not about you. If you can't get to that spot, it's not about you. It's not about you pricing it too high or you too greedy or you said the wrong thing or they're rude. If it's none of that, it's not personal. One aside here, if you can't get yourself to that place of it's not about me or it's not about them or this isn't personal, you can always put the phrase in front of it. It's possible. It's possible it's not about me. It's possible this isn't personal. Just to take that temperature down so that then you're able to problem solve. And the second piece of the problem solving is really going down two paths. Yeah, what if there really is a problem here? What would I do? What if there isn't a problem? What would I do? Not from a place of judging you or judging them, but what would I do? And the answer in this case with this particular consultant who was facing this challenge was if there was a problem, what would I do? I would reach out. In this case, he had sent a couple of emails. He's like, look, I have the person's phone number. I'm going to send them a text. I'm going to start off the text by saying, I hope it's okay to text you. Is there really a problem? Maybe there isn't really a problem. What would I do? It was the same answer. I would reach out over text. I'm not going to write this off. I'm not going to assume they're just being rude and I don't want to work with them anyway. I'm not going to assume I did something wrong. Instead, I'm going to reach out from a place of just pure curiosity, as if nothing has gone wrong, as if there is no problem. Till someone tells me there's a problem, there's no problem. And not from an over-explaining, not from a justifying, not from a pointing the finger perspective, but truly, hey, I hope it's okay if I'm texting you here on this number. I sent over this SOW a couple days ago. I was just curious about the status. That's it. It's a pretty straightforward process, right? But we get it so in our head that those types of solutions aren't even available to us. And so that's why I want to share this with you today is really thinking about when this type of situation happens, in the first example where you've got a verbal, like the consultant I was working with had a verbal agreement and then it went dark. What do you do? So that gives you hopefully a really good example of what you do there to engage your problem solving capabilities. By the way, that consultant that I just described to you, my consultant client, he did that, texted the person with that similar verbiage. And then the person wrote back and said, hey, sorry, I've been really busy. I have the SOW. I'll get it over to finance right now. That was it. That was it. All this emotional turmoil. And there was really no problem. Had there been a problem, it would have been great to know, look, I know that I've exhausted the scenarios. I've texted them. Now I'm just going to calmly wait until I hear back from them, not making it about me, not making it about them. This is just part of running a business that things don't always go in the time frame I want them to go in. Okay, so as we wrap up this first example, I wanted to share with you a few ideas about prevention. You cannot prevent this situation from happening. I wish you could. I personally would love for it not to happen just because it is an emotional roller coaster. But there are some techniques you can leverage to reduce this, especially if it's happening to you more frequently than normal. So, what I want to help you with in terms of prevention are the scenarios where there is a problem, not where the guy was on vacation, your consulting client was on vacation, not where they were sick or buried in, a mountain of work and just hadn't gotten to it. Not that. What I'm talking about is when it really is a problem, when there really is a problem and they're not responding to you because they've hit a snag internally, for example, and they're not getting the approval they thought they would, and they're just not ready to fill you in on what's happening behind the scenes. If you're seeing that type of thing in your business more than once, you might consider some of these prevention techniques that I'll share with you right now. Again, can't fully prevent all of them, but this will help. So, first and foremost, I would look back at my sales process and ask myself, what am I not asking in that sales process that I should be asking or that I could be asking in order to bring out some more of this type of information earlier and be able to help contribute to the problem solving of it, right? If your internal stakeholders are hitting snags in terms of getting final approvals, you want to be able to help them know that that could be a thing that happens and help them navigate through it versus being at the mercy of them taking the baton and moving it forward without them seeing you as a sounding board or expert in this case. You're not just an expert in the consulting work that you do, but you're also an expert in how do you get consulting work approved? How do you get in consulting work, moving forward in an organization? So with that, I would say ask yourself what you might be hesitating to ask in a sales process. For example, it may make sense for you to be asking the question, what could get in the way of us progressing to the XYZ start date? Oftentimes, we worry about asking questions like that because we think it's going to put some kind of idea in their head or make them nervous about something. So we avoid asking it. Versus if you look at this slightly differently, you're the expert. You're someone who helps them navigate challenges. One of the challenges could be them getting internal approvals and moving forward. You see this over and over again because this is what you do in your business, contracting with corporate clients. They might not have ever done this type of a contract before. They might not have done it for a couple of years. They don't do this all the time. You are an expert in this, and you asking them what could get in the way of us progressing to XYZ start date is not about you. It's about them, helping them to take a step back, think about the bigger picture, which most of us don't have time to do, and then thinking about, okay, what could get in the way of us progressing forward? Oh yeah, John in finance is kind of a stickler about this and that. What could we do? Oh, maybe we could break it into two parts, or we could have a meeting with John, whatever the thing is, helping them to navigate through the situation versus you wanting to avoid the topic, thinking it's just going to bring up, a roadblock that they hadn't thought of before. So that's the first thing from a prevention perspective, really asking those stakeholders you're working with the kinds of questions that you might be hesitant to ask in that sales process. And then also the second piece of a prevention method here of, how do you reduce the amount of number of times where you get this verbal and then the contract doesn't move forward when it's not just, simple, the stakeholder got too busy. Build out your business process around this. And here's the way that I like to look at this. If I was building a sales team for my company and I was a CRO, the chief revenue officer, how would I train my reps to handle this scenario? I guarantee if you were the CRO, you wouldn't be telling your reps to don't worry about it because they probably don't like them anymore. The potential client just doesn't like you anymore. You should move on to another client. You would never say that if you were the CRO training your sales reps. So think about it from that perspective. If I were the CRO and I was training my sales reps, which happens to be you in this case, right? You are the CRO and you are the sales rep. But if I were the CRO, just pretend for a minute you've got two people here. If you were the CRO, how would you train your reps to handle this? Likely, you would have them establishing certain touch points with the stakeholder versus handling everything over email after you get to a verbal. If you were the CRO, you might encourage them to establish a very specific follow-up cadence. First, you're going to follow up in 2 days, and then in 2 more days, and then in a week, or however that looks. You would be giving them, this is what I expect you to do in order to maximize the potential for success. Build that out for yourself. All right. Okay, let's keep going. Example number two. So this example is you've signed a contract. So all the signatures are done and then it doesn't start. You think you're home free, right? You've got a signed contract. They've approved. They might have even paid a little bit, some amount upfront, depending on your payment terms. They might have paid 50% upfront, depending on your payment terms. But the project doesn't start, it stalls. This is another specific example here just to bring this to life. I had a client who got a verbal and he had been doing some one-off engagements for a company and they were going really well. And he ended up getting a signed contract for the entire enterprise to do this type of work that he does. He had some initial business units raise their hand and say, we want to be next. We want to work with this consultant and we're ready to go. The type of work that this consultant does is also very close to revenue. So this isn't, work that's really far away from revenue. And sometimes we think of that type of work as harder to, get traction. This is what you would assume has natural traction, which is work that it doesn't create revenue, but it's adjacent, very enabling of revenue. So imagine this, you've got this client, you've already worked with the client in a couple of business units delivering what you do. You land and sign an enterprise agreement. You have business units who are raising their hand saying, I want to be first, put me, in the queue. I want to be first. And the client knows that what you do helps them make more money. And it still stalls. I share this example with you, not only because I'm going to walk you through the process here, but also because a lot of times we think, oh, my thing is stalling because the client isn't that eager, or this thing is as eager as other consultants' clients are, or my client isn't as X, Y, and Z. I'm telling you right now that all the ingredients might be available within a given client and they still might stall. So don't do that to yourself to say, well, my thing isn't as good as other consultants and that's why it's happening to me. Or my thing isn't as tangible as other consultant, that's why it's happening to me. I'm telling you, this happens to all of us. So cross that reason off your list because it's not helpful. Okay, so with that, let's talk about the process that I walked through with this consultant so that you can think about how it might apply to you and your business. So first and foremost, he realized, I helped him realize he's in his head, right? He's in his head because this whole thing happened. He had these people that said they were eager, and then he wasn't making progress on getting them actually going with the implementation, with the engagement. And so he's in his head, right? He's starting to think and say to me, this is out of my control. X, Y, and Z are happening. This is the reason why my hands are tied. I just need, these things to happen in order for this to move forward. And some of that makes sense. But when you keep getting this sort of stall effect going on, putting your head in the space of, this is out of my control, I'm just going to wait until the cards fall into place, you could look back quarters later and nothing has happened. This consultant who was thinking, this is not under my control, and on the surface of it, if you were hearing what I was hearing, you would probably agree with him. It does sound very logical about all the reasons why his hands are tied and he just has to be patient. But when you dig under the covers, that's really not helpful, because when you think you're not in control of something and you just have to be patient, then you again shut down your problem solving capabilities. When I was working with this consultant and we were pulling back the layers, we really realized that under the surface, it isn't as much about I'm not in control. It's a lot more about him thinking he's not good at this, him thinking he doesn't know what he's doing, him thinking they said they want it, but they don't really, him thinking maybe they've changed their mind. So on the surface, he's saying things like, well, this is why it's stalled. This is why it's out of my control. I'm going to have to be patient. But through the coaching work that we did together, we really unpacked that and figured out under the surface, like for most of us, it was much more about his insecurities and worry about what he's good at or what he's not good at, or that they think, that his client doesn't really think he knows what he's doing. All of those self doubts are really what's driving this justification about why he thought his hands were tied. So I really helped him to see that this is what was happening. The rules were hard and fast, and, his hands were tied, that there was a wiggle room. That, yes, there were some things that were challenging, of course. There were some dynamics that were causing this stall that were out of his control. That is true. And it's also true that he wasn't able to problem solve for this because his emotions were high. Again, the self doubt undercurrent happening and him not wanting to face that. And so it was just so much easier to say, this is out of my control. And so the tool here for you, what I would say, if you're noticing this happening where you've got signed contracts and then the clients aren't starting when they say they want to start, where you've got that stall going on, really think about, what are the questions I'm asking myself? Are you asking yourself some form of, how is this out of my control? Or how do I not have control in this situation? Or are you asking yourself questions like, how can I make this easier for them to get going? These conditions might be in place that are creating a bit of a stall. And how can I make it easier to help them move forward? When you think about what is in your control, you start to unlock problem solving capability that isn't there when you're so focused on what is out of your control. What the reasons, all the logical reasons are why you've got this stall going on. So, one of the terms I love to use here is radical responsibility. I didn't create this term, it's from a book. I'll put the link in the show notes. The name is escaping me at the moment, but I will put the link in the show notes because I want to make sure that I attribute it to the person who created that term. The point here is that you take radical responsibility. If there is a stall happening, wherever it is in the sales process, if there is a stall happening, take radical responsibility, which means, if all of this was under my control, what would I do? If it's completely under my control, how would I handle this? That helps you to shift the questions to things like, how can I make this easier for them? What is the blocker here? What are 5 ways that I could help them move past the blocker? Those are so much more valuable questions than you asking yourself, well, why is this stalled? How is this not in my control? Asking the question, and which your brain will go to work answering, how is this stall, not in my control? There's nothing I can do about it. All that does is give you a bunch of justifications and excuses that keeps you in your little comfort zone of, you know what, it's okay, it's not my fault, and this client is frustrating. Versus, you know what, if I were fully in control, if I have radical responsibility over this, what would I do to help move past this logjam? So those hopefully give you some really in-depth examples of when stalls occur. Oftentimes they occur after a verbal and before an executed contract, or after an executed contract and before the project kickoff, and help you to see where you do have control over the stall. There is opportunity for you to overcome that stall if you put your head into the space that's productive. And so now we're moving into the formula here. If we think about it from a big picture perspective, it can be very common for you to say, you know what, the stall, wherever it occurs in the process, isn't out of my control. It's not my fault. Or it's an indication that I've done something wrong. I got too greedy. I gave them the wrong pricing. Once they went through an approval process, they were shot down. Whatever it is that you're telling yourself, when you make this stall about you personally, that you've done something wrong, or you make the stall about the other person, that they've got bad intentions, or they've decided they don't like you, or that this situation is out of your control, you shut yourself down. And what I want to share with you today as we're bringing this all together is for you to be able to look at where you do have control, where you are able to help move this situation through a stall. And the first place that starts with being aware of where your mind is right now, blaming, creating excuses, self-judgment. Where is your brain right now that's creating this dynamic? Emotions are high, logic is low. You corner yourself into a box when you do that. So first of all, noticing you're doing it. Second of all, acknowledging that that's normal. You're a human. It's not a problem. But also invoking the tools that I just shared with you to make that cycle of judgment and cornering yourself so you cannot problem solve, making it shorter and making it less intense. So then you can put the final piece of the puzzle into place here, which is redirecting to problem solve. And that involves you realizing this is not about me. This is not personal. And if I take 100% responsibility for the situation, it's all on me from the perspective of it's not personal, but I have control. And then put on that relevant hat, put on the CRO hat or put on the COO hat and ask yourself the questions that are so much more impactful. How can I make this more streamlined? How can I help, be an expert to them in terms of getting a contract approved and ultimately kicked off the engagement? How can I make this a better, more streamlined experience? How can I support them? How can I help them move through this process? How can I just get in touch with them in a simple way? Oh yeah, a text might do. Those types of answers for yourself when you've taken the high emotions out of it, not made it about you, and also taken 100% responsibility and using the assumption that they really do want to work with you and they want your expertise and you're here to help them wherever they are in the process. So that is what I have for you today about these scenarios where your clients may be stalling in the process and using mental work, mindset to help you unlock problem solving versus staying stuck in that quagmire that so many of us are about trying to justify or figure out the reason and spending all of our emotional time and energy and thought process in that zone versus moving over into the zone of problem solving and taking responsibility and figuring out how to help your end client move past wherever they're stuck in the process. All right, my friend, thank you for tuning in. I will also remind you to go take that consultant's pricing assessment. It is at icpricing.com. It's a great companion to this because so many of us get stuck thinking that when we don't hear back from clients right away, that something has gone wrong from a pricing perspective. So that will also help you in this front as well. All right. See you again next week. Take care. Thanks for joining me this week on the Grow Your Independent Consulting Business podcast. If you liked today's episode, I have 3 quick next steps for you. First, click subscribe on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to make sure you don't miss future episodes. Next, leave me a review in your podcast app so other independent consultants can find and benefit too. And finally, to put the ideas from today's episode into action, head over to melissalieberman.com for the show notes and more resources to help you grow your consulting practice from your first few projects into a full-fledged business. See you next week.